Hello, dear lurkers, and welcome back to the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. Today, Alex and I are going to discuss the episode Convictions.
And we probably should address that Meike is not lost. We will get to see her relatively soon, and hopefully in like a whole new setup. There's some interesting things brewing there, but right now she's still lost in hyperspace. So we will talk about this episode alone for this time. And as usual, we start with a little bit of a synopsis. Convictions is our episode, and Babylon 5 is in danger, something that the German titles love telling us every time. It's either Babylon 5 is under attack or aliens are fighting. This time it's a threat from the inside. We get this mysterious message: there's X amount of hours until chaos will break loose. And there is quite a lot of chaos. There's a series of explosions in the station, starting down below and hitting various areas on the station, culminating in this big threat of an explosion that's going to be so big it's going to destroy the entire station. Fairly classic as far as that goes. So naturally, we spend a lot of the episode with the big investigation led by Garibaldi, trying to figure out who is behind these explosions and how to stop them. But we also spend a fair amount of time with other characters that are being directly affected by these explosions, and probably none more so than Londo, who first narrowly escapes an explosion thanks to Lanier, spends some time in, I think, maybe a moment of clarity, reflecting over his own life, I guess, a little bit. We will talk about that until he is hit by the next explosion that traps him in an elevator with Jakar. And I mean, in season 1, I think we had a lot of fun with an elevator scene between Jakar and Londo. So it's a good tradition that we return to that. As usual, let's start with some first impressions on this, if you have any first impressions on this episode.
As I already said to Alex, I don't have very strong feelings for this episode. Also the first time I've watched it, so it's definitely just an episode that is interesting, and we get a lot of heartwarming and interesting and important character moments, but it's not one where I have a very strong take on. It still feels like normal, like a normal day on Babylon 5. I mean, I know we have like explosions going on and that stuff, but for a place that is so valuable and so important, that kind of still feels like daily life. And so it's the show slowly picking up pace, but not very fast.
That is a good way of describing it. And as Ivanova would say, boom, 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 boom. Indeed, a normal day on Babylon 5. And I like this as a descriptor, because this very much feels like we are still in the normal day-to-day of Babylon 5, but it's getting more vicious. Like the threats that we have on the stations, the honestly stuff that Sheridan just has to deal with on top of everything else, the big plot line of the season, it just keeps getting more and a bit more aggressive as well. While all the cool character moments we get in this episode are still kind of holdovers from season 2. I think we're still dealing with everything that has happened more so than new things coming in for that. So this is going to be interesting. And I guess we do have one major A-plot. We didn't mention yet that we do have some newcomers on the station as well. We have Brother Theo and his collection of monks that eventually do the job of a facial recognition system, trying to help.
But yeah, talk about that moment for a little bit.
We will have to. But so there's a few things. They all connect very closely to these explosions. So I would say, let's maybe start off by talking about the first explosion, just to get kind of a feel for the threat. But then we're going to take a step back and talk about everyone around these explosions. So Londo getting hit, Lanier getting hit, Londo and Jakar being trapped, the monks trying to help. And then we're going to wrap this up with sort of Garibaldi's entire investigation and the resolution where Sheridan also gets a shining moment. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes.
Okay, we should get better about having a clear structure in these, so maybe this is going to help with that. So let's start with the first explosion. And this really just stood out for me, because this is the first time I really noticed how many contraptions and unnecessary extra steps are involved in this first explosion, which I think is very interesting once we start talking about the guy behind these explosions. Because this time it was the first time I really noticed the lurkers are going around in down below, and they are looking for scrap. They find some scrap, and it's this oversized cage that closes in around them for no other reason than pure maliciousness, I have to assume, because there's really no reason why that would have to be the case for them to trigger the bomb and blow everything up. But it's just whoever was building these bombs just was a bit sadistic about it and want to make it as mean as possible. So that's fun.
I never noticed that detail, so you're actually telling me something entirely new. I'm sorry, I never really looked at it that way.
Which now makes me paranoid because there's a decent chance that I'm just making it up in my memory, even though we just watched the episode. But no, if I can find it, I will put like a little screenshot of the trap contraption in here because I really like that detail. But this is the general modus operandi for these explosions. Garibaldi identifies this very early on. This first explosion we can't really follow up on a lot because as much as we like our lurkers in this podcast, the station doesn't really care about them all that much.
Sorry, lurkers.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Bad day to be a lurker.
General, always a bad day, but especially on this one when down below is not just dingy, but also starts blowing up. So let's go forward to the second explosion, which takes place in this kind of terminal area of Babylon 5, the customs area, where Lanier, Delenn, and Londo are just in the process of going through this little airlock area as everything blows up, the airlocks come crashing down, and Lanier saves Londo in a, I guess, very characteristic Minbari moment. So maybe let's start here and follow the fallout from this as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't a big surprise that he saved Londo because he's Arambari from the religious caste. Honestly, I would be surprised if he didn't save Londo. If he said like, oh, well, you know, this guy kind of sucks, so just let him burn. Like, that would not feel right.
That's true. No, I am curious what a warrior caste Minbari would have done in this situation because they never really seem very sympathetic. They seem like the kinds of guys being like, well, I guess it's better for everyone if he dies, so we're just gonna let that happen. But on the end, they are supposed to be these like very honorable and self-sacrificial people. So if we put Neroon there, I just would be curious what he would do.
Yeah. I mean, I would actually think that he would definitely take more considerations. And probably come to the conclusion that it's not worth saving him. But I'm not entirely sure. I just said religious caste because religious caste really for me is the point where I say, okay, of course he saves Loria. Like, it's not a question. I think even Minbari from the warrior caste could come to the same decision, but I think it would take longer and would be a different process. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because ultimately this is a question that all characters seem to wrestle with a little bit. Like Lanier himself seems later on a bit unsure if this was the right call. And long before that, Londo himself seems actually quite shaken by this. And I do like that his first way of showing this is like throwing his weight around as like this big diplomat. Give him the best aid you possibly can. He saved my life. Listen here.
Sorry.
You also need some medical aid. Which I think is probably not necessary. I'm pretty sure Franklin is enough of a workaholic that he does the best he can for every single patient he has. But it's very in character for Londo for this to be his first gut instinct. I think especially in Centauri society, this is something you would need to do to make sure somebody actually gets help.
I mean, actually, I think talking about Londo on his bedside, on Lanier's bedside is something that we have to do completely on its own. Like, that is definitely something that we need to analyze. But yeah, so where do you want to go now? Do you want to talk about Londo at Lanier's bedside? Or do you want to talk about Lanier's reasoning and decision towards saving Londo?
I mean, we get Lanier's reasoning once he wakes up later on, right? So let's stick with Londo for first. And yeah, of course, you're right. We do go with him to his bedside, which is sort of the next step. Now Londo has had a little bit of time to reflect, I guess, and yeah, something in him pulls him towards sickbay and sitting by Lanier's side, really just talking a lot to himself, which I think my first impression is this is not something that Londo does a lot, this sort of introspection, and maybe this is why a lot of things bubble up to the surface here.
Yes, he doesn't do that very often, but also this feels kind of safe because it feels like nobody can hear him. So it is a bit of, I think he has someone close who he knows and who he trusts, but that person can't respond and can't remember whatever bubbles up, you know?
I do wonder how much there is because of course he like justifies being there by saying, well, talking to people can help. And I wonder how much this is genuine from him, that maybe he does suspect that perhaps Lanier does get a little bit of the stuff that he's talking about, but he's not concerned about that because it's Lanier, it's this drinking buddy. They played poker together. That there is this special relationship that they have, even though we don't touch on it very often. But it feels like something that especially Londo would put a lot of stock in because he has lost his friendship with Garibaldi. So even though Lanier probably only was ever nice to him because it was kind of his job as a diplomatic attaché, I think we kind of see Londo grasping at straws here and trying to find a friend, and then this friend is bedridden and can't talk back or run away. So it's the perfect opportunity for him to really pour his heart out.
Yes, I think he definitely looks helpless and a little bit inexperienced with what he's doing there.
Yes, very much. I think the first big dialogue bit he has is this, well, if I was in your position and you were in your position, nothing would work. But if you were in my position and I was in your position, I'm sure you would do the same. And it seems like we get to see him in real time work through this thought process of, why did you do this? Would I have done the same? Which I have my thoughts on. I don't think Londo is that self-sacrificial, but who knows? Um, and yeah, it's just him settling into this, like getting to grips with these thoughts, and then it transitions slowly into trying to make lighter of the situation. It's an interesting sort of character study, I think.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to write it out eternally, so I think, do we have anything more to say to that?
I mean, I would like to connect this because, big story-wise, this is kind of a self-contained episode. Our villain doesn't have much to do with the rest of the show, so I would like to see if we can connect these character moments somewhat. And for me, what comes to mind is Garibaldi talking about Londo, how Londo seems afraid at all the time. I think that was even last episode, where he is now representing the Centauri Republic at the height of its power, but at the same time, Londo is really struggling and holding on for dear life. And we've seen Garibaldi talk about this, but I don't think we've ever seen this firsthand so much. I think this is the first instance where you really get to see sort of this level of vulnerability from Londo, and that's I think is significant.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. I don't know if vulnerability would actually be what I was thinking of. I don't know.
Right.
But it probably also fits. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and maybe because I was more focusing on the helplessness and the not knowing what to say and what to do in this situation, because standing on someone's bedside is not something that he's so much used to.
I mean, this tracks as well, right? Back all the way back in season 1, which we've been sporadically rewatching in the meantime. We get to see Londo in a life or death situation. He gets saved after an assassination attempt, essentially, by Timov donating a bunch of blood to him. And a big important thing that she says is to never tell him about that, because essentially he wouldn't know how to deal with it, and it would create like a power dynamic between them that he doesn't want. And I think we see some of that here. Like here, his life was saved, and he really doesn't know how to deal with it. And it really, in his mind, seems to also create this, issue. Like, how do I repay this? How do I repay this? Do I have to? And I like that it's sort of fits that Londo seems to have these big character moments in sickbay a lot.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that also kind of describes him as a person very well, because when he has these character moments in sickbay, it is kind of isolated, so there's not much of an audience, there's not much of of another context, or the other contexts have been removed. And it also kind of shows, I think, where he is socially at the moment, especially ever since the Centauri invaded Narn again. He's kind of isolated. No one responds back. They've turned their back on him and can't really deal with him. So I think all of these moments that we had there with Londo and Lanier are kind of acting that out. That there's definitely this broken connection to all the others.
Yeah, that he's still trying to fix that somehow, right? But he's burnt a lot of bridges, quite literally, to get to this point. There's one more point I would like to pull out of this, and then we can move on. But I think ever since the invasion of Narn, the bombardment of Narn, where Londo was present, he has also been very much in this mode of what's happening is just what has to happen. And yeah, it's all terrible, but it's all deterministic. I really don't have any choice. Like, things have been put into motion and there's just no way to stop that. And now he's confronted with a situation where there was nothing determined about this. There was nobody expecting, like, nothing forced Lanier to do what he did. The fact that Londo is fine and around and still gets to make any choices doesn't fit this worldview that Londo has kind of built around himself to protect himself. And I think maybe this is also part of what makes him reflect a little bit in these moments, because this is really, really making him struggle with explaining why he is here, because suddenly he can't say anymore it was just determined by fate or something like that. It was just linear instead. But okay, we will revisit Londo, of course. We can move on to Linnear's own musings about this, like a little bit later when he is recovered enough. He gets woken up by Londo telling a terrible, terrible joke and Franklin repeating it. Do we want to talk about the joke?
I don't get the joke.
I mean, yeah, it's Centauri humor, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's ultimately just amusing about, I think no joke is funny if you explain it, but I think I can explain the joke to some degree.
I mean, maybe I get the joke, maybe it's just not funny. I don't know. Because, I mean, like, the point of this light bulb image is that all the Centauri single-handedly could change the light bulbs, but still it was so much better and nicer when all the slaves had to do it.
I mean, yeah, but I don't think that's the joke. I think like, if we actually talk about this being a reflective moment for Londo, right? For all of season 1 and 2, Londo has taken the Centauri Republic incredibly seriously, and it's all about recapturing the glory. Like, when he talks about the good old days, when he talks about making Centauri Prime great again, like, he's serious about that. He actually wants that to happen. And I think the whole point of this joke is, the fact that the Centauri would have hundreds of servants, and the whole ceremony and shebang about changing a light bulb. It's ridiculous. It makes fun of how big and pompous the court is, and of, how every Centauri has this massive headpiece and they have these shiny, silly, like, Napoleonic uniforms. And I think this is a new thing for Londo to really acknowledge. It's kind of ridiculous what we're doing. Like, for God's sake, I have a portrait of myself hanging on my wall and stuff like that. And maybe I'm putting way too much into this, but for me, this is what makes this joke funny. It's acknowledging the silliness of the pomp of a royal court and all that.
It's a bit like joking about your own depression. In
Well,
Londo's case.
that seems very much like something Londo would do
Yeah.
as well. So yeah, it tracks.
It's like the memes I share early in the morning when I don't want to exist. Yeah, okay.
You are just like Londo is the takeaway from this episode now. Yes. Regardless, though, I don't think Lanier gets the joke or finds it funny either way. But it is enough to wake him up, and he does muse a little bit about, well, all my honor system and tradition tells me I have to save life and hold it sacred, even if it's the life of someone who doesn't do the same. And I think we do see him grapple with this a little bit, which is interesting because early Lanier, who wouldn't even look up at Delenn, I don't think would have ever questioned any of the ideals of his faith, and now he's doing that. So good for him. He's thinking about saving a war criminal. That's good. That's progress. Let's check in briefly with Sinclair. Not Sinclair. Sinclair's not here at the moment. With Sheridan and Garibaldi, who actually I like that they get as much of a normal investigation procedural here, like analyzing where the bomb was and what it was made of, and we actually see that there's a lot of people involved with this investigation. Like, this is not security chief Garibaldi putting on a hat and like interviewing two people and coming to a conclusion. No, we see that there's this entire security apparatus working, and they get like this idea, oh, this is somebody who's jerry-rigging these bombs on by his own. It must be somebody with this and this qualification, and oh yeah, probably somebody who will try and watch the world burn as these bombs go off. So I do like that they very early clock this criminal and go on their way, but not fast enough to prevent another explosion from going off, that being the one that has a very ambitious special effect, I think, also, as the fireball comes down the hall and Jakar and Londo jump into the elevator.
Right, we have that whole thing going on in this episode. I almost forgot about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't. Yeah, yeah, that effect wanted to be big. You're right.
It's so ambitious, It reminds me of Independence Day. It's fine.
I mean, actually, what I thought in that moment, and that's where my thought got stuck for a while, was a bit like, there's a fire, so a lift is probably not safe. But then again, where else could I go in that moment? Probably nowhere.
I think, when people tell you not to use the elevator in case of an emergency, it's there is fire on the floor, and if you have a choice, you take the stairs. If the fireball is literally running at you, it's fine.
But it's just that I still would assume I would expect to suffocate much, much earlier than they did. So, but okay, a space station probably also has more safety mechanisms in their transport tubes than our normal lifts. So if I have to admit to the listeners, I'm terribly claustrophobic. I literally start shaking when I have to take the lift, so that's why my thoughts are lingering here so much.
I mean, the important thing here is still suffocating, at least for one party in this elevator, is the point. So let's start talking maybe a little bit about how these two handle this, because I think it's, we joke about this, but it is poignant that taking elevators together is kind of a thing that Jakar and Londo do. And, 2 years ago, it was them bickering over the head of a poor human about policy and where they're at. Now an entire war has happened, so there is none of that fun, jokey bit left, at least initially. Signified by the fact that Londo is unconscious and Jakar is not going to jack shit about that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's interesting to talk about how they both handle it very differently. The reaction to expecting death in that situation. While it's interesting that Londo still has this motivation to get out of there, and his focus is fully on, I have to survive. I have to survive, I have to live, I have to get out of here. And Jakar can focus completely on, okay, I'm dying, but at least I see him dying too. Which is interesting that he can cope by just completely ignoring his own need and motivation, and also just, I think, basic drive to survive. Just by, okay, but at least he dies too. And I think also it kind of tells us a lot about where emotionally Narn are at the moment, and why, I mean, I think in this conflict we have learned that we can have a lot of empathy for them. We actually can, as viewers now, I think, side with them, definitely, even if it has been probably hanging in the balance in the first season. I think this shifted rapidly toward them because we saw their reality for the first time. But also you have to admit that this level of emotional radicalization that we see in Jakar here in general is dangerous. Like, no matter who you have in any kind of conflict, you don't want anyone to be at that state, because that's a very critical point to be at.
I mean, especially because even if you're like purely on the Narn side, or for the Narn on the station having a borderline not suicidal, but devil may care attitude about life, having ambassador or citizen Jakar is not great. This is not the guy you want in charge of organizing your resistance. And I mean, that's what he's been doing, right? He's been trying to stay in this leadership role, and this is something that the next episode actually will explore a lot more. But right now, he is really at the stage where, yeah, he has all these things he has to do to organize a resistance, but honestly, he's just tired of it all. And it's kind of an interesting role reversal between the two, because ultimately, initially, it was always Londo who was much more fatalistic and had this like deterministic outlook where he was, early Londo, I would have expected to be like, I'm stuck in this elevator, but I know my death dream is getting strangled by Jakar like 20 years into the future, so basically I'm fine. This is gonna be okay. And I wonder how much of Londo's like very active, I need to get out of here, I need to save Jakar, maybe even like work together with him, how much that is informed by the fact that he was just saved by Linnea, that he just had this introspective moment. On another level, it also feels kind of like maybe a commentary by JMS on the tropes that surround this story. Like, oh, you have these two adversaries who are at each other's throats, but then a critical situation arises where they have to work together and mend their differences to survive. And Jakar looks at that suggestion and just says, no, fuck that. I honestly much happier dying. And
I mean, it is a very common trope when you have stories about like World War II and things like that.
yeah,
Two soldiers that then work together to survive, and then in the end they are fighting each other again. And yeah, so I mean, actually, what I was just thinking about, we have this Stargate episode that is executed with Todd. You remember?
oh yeah, we have Target loves doing that, giving us like enemies, frenemies sort of situations. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it is a very strong comment to on wars and conflicts to show characters who just don't play it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because yeah, I think especially when we have sci-fi that was written in the light of World War II and of the Cold War, it is often written in this understanding of uniting, that you can also unite by having a common enemy. So you can fight on the side of someone who is like ideologically completely your opposite to defeat someone else. And that actually, I don't know, I always feel like this narrative is on a very, very thin ice.
I mean, that's something we worth discussing. That there's
But also probably,
sure.
Probably was worth discussing in a lot of points in the show, actually, because I think that will continue. And also just put it, yeah, continue first.
No, I mean, it's also a question always, of course, like, is Babylon 5 cynical about that thing or not? I think like a very famous example of this sort of storyline is Enemy Mine, a book and a movie about like two fighter pilots stranding on the same planet and learning to live together and, creating this sort of bridge building. I think the point in difference here is that usually when you get this kind of story also from, both fictional and real life examples in the world wars and such, usually you're talking about grunts on the ground, the soldiers that were thrown into this and are, sitting in trenches on both sides and having a shit time, where this can easily work. The difference here is we're talking about two people who are instigators of this conflict, who are like higher echelons, who have like made big decisions, and they actually embody the sort of ideological differences also much more than your common foot soldier would. And so this trope doesn't come to fruition here as much.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. That is a big difference.
But I mean, it's still a fair comparison. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely one that we have to come back to. That's why I wanted to mention it, because it will matter in a lot more moments.
Definitely.
To keep it spoiler free. Yeah. Anything else you want to analyze from their lift time?
I mean, there's two things. One is sort of the technicality of, I wonder how serious Jakar actually is about this whole argument of, I don't have to lift a finger, I can just watch you die, and I don't risk anybody's lives. Like, this is my one chance to see you die without 500 Nan being executed. I think if we're honest with ourselves, we know, and Jakar probably also knows that this is not how it's going to go. Like, if they both had died in this elevator, of course the Centauri would execute 1,500 Narn. Like, no, what Centauri is going to look at that and be like, well, technically it's not murder, it's like, in German, unterlassene Hilfeleistung, so you're definitely not going to execute somebody for that, because we take our law seriously with our enslaved people. Like, I don't think I don't think Jakar is naive enough to actually believe that. I think it's much more an indicator of he just, at this point, doesn't give a damn anymore.
I want to have your voiceover. It's not murder, it's just unterlassene Hilfeleistung.
This is like the one clip we can post on Blue Sky to promote this.
For the listeners who don't understand German, it's unterlassene Hilfeleistung means you could easily help, but you didn't. So just when someone dies because you don't move a finger, although you could.
Which is a concept in outside of Germany as well, but I'm too lazy to learn that.
I don't know the concept in any English word that would fit at the moment. Yeah, but anyway, that's what we were saying here. Yeah, probably. So I don't know. I think, but I mean, Narn have this very strong honor concept. I think so. In a moment where usually your survival instinct would kick off, I think just focusing on "I can see you die" is just coping mechanism.
It fits with the blood oath thing, right?
Yeah, because satisfying this honor concept then is something he focuses on instead of, oh shit, I'm dying.
Yeah, of course. There's transition though later on, like near the end of the episode, where they do actually get saved, where this sort of complete fatalistic like outlook of Jakar quickly gives way of them just like lying on the ground and insulting each other, which sounds a lot more familiar. And I wonder, like, is this already a moment where you see something changing in their relationship again, or is it just like this momentary, like deep down they're both still genuinely glad to be saved, but also, god damn, it means I have to live with this guy for a little longer?
It's hard to tell, but I don't think I see a change in their relationship like that
Okay.
yet. What I think, what I saw sometimes, or what I could imagine actually, is that Londo was surprised by the strong ideological honor kind of motivation that Jakar has in a life or death situation, because he is locked up with Jakar, who still has, I mean, the Centauri and Londo basically took everything from him, and he still has something to believe in, while Londo struggles to have something to believe in.
There's definitely this high concept, like ideology level to that. I do wonder if it's also to some degree the same thing we've talked about with Linear, where on some level Londo is in this complete social isolation ever since he returned to Babylon 5, and he's just grasping at straws, and like this almost playful rivalry with Chakal was a relationship that he had, and he's almost like trying to get back to that, which I guess also illustrates his complete disconnect from everything. Like the idea, yeah, even simply the idea that he proposes, let's work together to get out of this lift, after I must drive a bombard your home world, is kind of laughable, that he doesn't like realize how far removed from any like real connection he is there. So it's oh, what a poor guy.
Yeah, because if he has lost his connections to reality, like this kind of connection to reality a long time ago, and he is confronted with Jakar, who has still a very strong conviction towards everything. And I think he also kind of envies that, because he doesn't have that. He doesn't believe in anything anymore. He doesn't have a connection to reality anymore, and is confronted with the absolute opposite. That Jakar still has something that he couldn't bomb away, and also he can't get.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of emblematic of Jakar in general, that he just can't get at him because he's just there on the silo, which is a nice thing to rub into Londo's face at every turn. But okay, I think this is like Londo's two big moments, a bit of introspection and his special time with Jakar. Let's move a little bit away from the victims of the explosions and into the actual investigation of the explosions and our like most 90s stereotypical bad guy of the week. And let's maybe return to first impressions for a moment here. I'm really curious what you think about this guy.
I mean, when we watched this right now, I said, oh, this is the Reichsbürger 101. Now this would also need explanations. Like, I think
No, it's like
no people know that. Do people outside of Germany know the Reichsbürger?
listen, the concept of I want to have my old country back, domestic terrorist, is really not that crazy to anyone. So you know, like in which direction this goes.
Yeah.
Okay, you just really want to explain Reichsbürger more.
I don't want to, but I think I need to add the conspiracy theory bit because that was what I found.
I mean, are there other kinds of domestic terrorists that are? I mean, sure, go ahead.
No, I don't want to explain it, but that's just the thing that it doesn't need more explanation. This fits it. But yeah, it really felt like a 101 on that. It's like, okay, so he lost his job. Okay, so his wife left. So now he lost his apartment. Everyone has done him badly, so now he builds bombs. I mean, not everyone who has bad luck ends up building bombs, but you know, it's
like the real interesting. It's an interesting angle because you know, one interesting aspect of this guy is obviously here we have a guy who's a terrorist who's like putting bombs in places for shock and awe. But it's written in a time before 9/11 and before this brand of domestic terrorism really took off. Especially sort of also this incel fueled, my wife left me like guy. Everyone has done me dirty. So it's an interesting portrayal of this kind of criminal from a different time. Like obviously you have this sort of incident before, but it wasn't as strongly a part of all pop culture as it is now.
Not of all pop culture, but I mean, you've had like kind of these attacks before in history, and if you look at people who are driven to these extremes, you can see kind of patterns. I mean, what we could talk about there on a more philosophical level actually would be to question. We often see these backstories to characters who become terrorists and who build bombs, but we also kind of cannot make the connection from the other way around, meaning anyone who has bad luck in life becomes a terrorist instead.
No, there is.
So, but there is the question of we kind of understand that with a certain degree of that personal lack of failure, of humiliation, of loss, people can turn to these extremists. So I don't know, I think I always have to question myself. So is it kind of like what I thought really is any kind of darkness kind of a part of all humans? Like, can we all be triggered into doing very wrong things in different situations? Or is it really something unique about these people that we have to uncover? That is something that I'm thinking about. It doesn't have to be something as extreme as terrorism or political extremism. I also thought of other examples from people I know. I don't know those people, I know other things. But where I really think, okay, so is this darkness something that is just in humans or in sentient beings and can be triggered off by whatever? Or is it really a unique feature of your character that you need to have? Because I'm not sure. And I study development and psychology, and I'm not sure. I don't think we know yet. I don't think we have an answer.
But we can talk about that. But there's maybe two big points I'd like to talk about what you just said. One is this idea, of course, we have this kind of criminal throughout all of history. So there are certain patterns that you can recognize. And I mean, if we talk a bit about the investigation that Garibaldi leads, we touched on this already briefly. I think this is exactly what he does very successfully. Like, this is one of these cases where they look at the first bomb site and they essentially immediately know what's going on. Like, every single assumption they make about this guy turns out to be correct. They can immediately know what kind of bomb it is. They immediately know who is the kind of person who could build this bomb. They can track like, oh yeah, usually this kind of criminal would try to bring some kind of message and he would like to be around the sites where his bombs went off to see what's happening. So this is probably how we catch them. This is the first thing they try, and you know what? It works. So there is definitely this element, and I think this is significant in how JMS chooses to portray this kind of criminal. This is really not a special dude. And when we get to the second point that you mentioned of where is like how much of a causality is there between somebody having a really shit day and then turning to these kinds of measures, I think there is something this episode says about that, where my perspective would be the way this show portrays it is, here is a guy who likes to think of himself as some kind of big criminal, antagonist, mastermind with a big dramatic backstory. And personally, I would say it's probably bullshit. It's like when he gives you this entire story about how humiliated he was, how he lost his job, how his wife left him, I would not even assume that this is literally something that happened to him in this like short order string of bad things happening to somebody that drove him there. My assumption would be, from how he's portrayed, that he's just this nut job and after the fact sort of stitch this as a reason together.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I don't
eh,
really. I mean, for the question that I was asking, that can be true, but for my question, doesn't make a difference.
I think it does. Like, okay, can I elaborate on that at least, or have you already decided that it's just no?
No, I don't think. I think I was asking another question, but okay.
Okay, then let me tell you, the way I understand your question is sort of this idea. A lot of people have shit days. Not all of them turn into terrorists, but there is a question of how can I grasp at that.
That was not my question.
Okay, then tell me
I mean,
the question.
I think that is part of it.
Okay.
But I think the more important question is, I mean, it is definitely key that we have more people who experience the same kind of bad things, who have the same kind of failures in life, who do never commit such a thing. It is always the thing. We have like so many people with like a mental illness. Most of them never stab a person, but we have this one famous case. But now there is the question of, is there like this, and that's why I said it's a more philosophical question that probably also can't be fully answered, but is there a breaking point inside every one of us where we are able to do very dark and very evil things? And it can be a totally different one. But is it inside all of us? Or can only some people be brought to this point? Which would kind of make them special? Or are they just unique and every one of us could break on some level and commit these things or similar? Okay. And I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
But but now maybe I can formulate more clearly how I think this episode, for me, approaches these questions, where it would say, for this guy, there wasn't really a breaking point. Like the idea that here you have this guy who behaves normally and then a bunch of bad things happen to him that drive him to this breaking point, and then it snaps and he starts building bombs. The way I see him portrayed is, this is kind of what he would like, this is how he justifies himself, that there was just so many outside factors happening to him that eventually he just broke, and this is why he is that way. But I would posit that probably he already was this way all the time, and just retroactively creates this narrative about this breaking point for him. So this is how I would answer this question. Then no, there isn't a breaking point that anybody can be driven to if just enough bad things happen. I would argue no, there's just individuals that do bad things and then explain it away by the bad things that have happened to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm not sure I agree.
That's a different beast, of course. That's
Because I think that I mean, whether it's actually like a pyramid of bad things that happened to me, or whether it is they kind of happened, but they were not really like sorted into these categories, and my mind does it later. For me, kind of in the end, has the same mental mechanism of getting to a point, like from a psychological point of view. Now, to be clear, also, I mean this on a very broad level. Like, I definitely think that most of us would never be able, like, to build bombs and kill a bunch of people, but just to be driven to a point where our moral compass is kind of weakened, and we do things that we never thought we were supposed to, and that we become kind of extreme in certain ways, and it can be a lot more harmless ways, kind of, or on smaller layer, smaller ways, I would say. But yes, that's just in general a question I was thinking about a lot lately, because also nowadays we have a lot of examples that make you think
yeah,
about
of
this.
course.
And yeah. So yeah, I mean this Terrace character is definitely one worth discussing, as we see.
I think there's two other elements to him that I find interesting. One is this idea that it really feels like he models himself after this ideal version of villain that he wants to be. But from the outside, this is really all over the place. Like, the initial messages that he sends almost strike me like, oh, he watched a Netflix documentary about the Zodiac killer who leaves like ominous messages and like deep puzzles. And so he decides, oh, I'm gonna make a recording of my voice and I'm gonna tell them that the bomb is gonna go off, but they don't know where. So I'm really like outsmarting them. I'm this like genius mastermind and mysterious, and I'm talking about chaos and all that. So there's this sort of theming going on. But then there's also this element of him that is just really into gadgets. This is why he builds this weird trap. And I really love, once we get to the confrontation, that he has like this decked out apartment where he has like a little remote camera and the speaker system to invite Sheridan in and have Sheridan like checked and all that. It's just so unnecessary. Like at that point, he must know his gig is already up. But he likes tinkering with this. It reminded me a little bit of Stephen King novel, Mr. Mercedes, where the is like really a deep dive into the psychology of also the mass murderer who has this like cellar where he imagines himself like, it's almost like a Star Trek command bridge with many monitors, and it's this like delusion of trying to make this into a big thing when it in reality is really simple. And you have this phase, and then he comes to face with Sheridan, and then he suddenly has this entire it reminded me of like this incel manifesto of everybody was mean to me and society like disregards me, so I am in the right of like dismantling society. So there's these like different archetypes almost that he puts on in different phases of this entire shebang, which I really like because it really suggests how much is happening in this guy's head, while at the same time also kind of showcasing the ridiculousness of it, because all of it is kind of, to us looking on the at it from the outside, very half-assed.
Yeah, so for you, this is all definitely just like a show that he also puts on for himself. It's like a masquerade.
Yeah.
And I not to say that he's not genuine about any of this, but I think it's really, it plays into this idea of showcasing this is a guy who's massively delusional, but it's not shown in him being this like crazy character who talks about talking to demons or something like that. It's just him really like emulating every archetype we've ever seen of this kind of criminal, which makes him a great stand-in, I think. We do have, maybe I highlight this because we do have other criminal characters in the show that we have yet to meet who maybe don't strike this balance as much and end up being more of this kind of caricature. So for this, like as Babylon 5 kind of showcasing, here's a domestic terrorist, and that is what that's like. He just holds up really well because I can look at this guy and I feel like I know which like online community he comes from in a 90s show. So it's really hitting like the correct nerve. Do we want to talk about maybe a bit more about Garibaldi, especially uh, sort of how the investigation gets to the point of actually confronting him. Because this is where we start talking about monks coming to the station.
Oh yes, we should not forget to talk about that, definitely.
They are very important.
Yeah, they're very important, but maybe let's first of all talk about the other very important thing about Garibaldi's brilliant prediction of self-recognition. Face recognition. Sorry, let me start again.
But we shouldn't do like the monks first, because they are who do that, right?
You want to do the monks first?
Yes.
I feel that's
Well, because if we talk about this facial recognition, who is doing that? The monks. Well, who are the monks? We haven't talked about them yet.
yeah. Okay, talk about the monks.
Well, I think there's two scenes about the monks that I would like to talk about. First is they arrive. There's monks on Babylon 5 now. What and why? And like we were talking about this episode initially, and we even getting confused because I mentioned monks and your mind jumps first to rangers because they are essentially monks. But we also had plus literal Christian monks on the station, which is a different thing.
I'm just a bit confused at the moment. The heat is getting to my head.
But it's completely justified because normal ass monks on a Babylon 5 station is not what you suspect in sci-fi, usually. We've all seen Star Trek. Star Trek doesn't have any monks.
Yes, but does Star Trek have any real humans? Okay, other discussion. In Babylon 5, it's not a big surprise, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, maybe if you watched for the very first time, at this point, maybe you are like, why are they here? But I think in general, I think the show has a very, very loving way of describing like religious people and religious figures. Also as describing them as kind of important instances in society and in history. So it doesn't surprise me. Also, when I think of, I mean, these monks, they are like normal Catholics. They are not something special.
They are something special, but I would have to like do a little bit of research what kind of special they're. I think they are supposed to be Jesuits, but
Yeah. Okay, but that, I mean,
They're not a weird like evangelical.
yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Because the Jesuit are also like an order that is super old already.
Yes,
From the like
they're
medieval times.
very traditional.
Yeah, but it's interesting that nowadays we see that as well, that these traditional instances, like the Catholic Church, like the last pope that we've had, kind of wrestle with modern times and try to find their standing. And they don't always end up at a standing that for us atheists is okay, but they also kind of try to still be this important institution. So that then monks say, okay, we have to step up, we have to be there at the frontier of where reality is shaped these days, and they end up in space. It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and I think there's like two layers of this.
And maybe this is where we should start talking about the second big scene these monks get, which is Brother Theo explaining to Ivanova that they actually want to live on Babylon 5. And it's not that Ivanova is openly hostile to this idea. I get more the impression she's like, really? Like, here? You want to live here? And Brother Theo is telling her like, well, you live here. She's, I'm posted here. I may choose any of this.
Yeah, I mean, what I said to Alex when we watched that scene just now was like, can you remember the witnesses knocking on Susan's door?
Yeah,
It would be a wonderful conversation.
It would be amazing. But no, they touch sort of on, because they really get real, why are you here? What do you want on Babylon 5? And they do tell you, like, because they are this very traditional, like, established institution, but at the same time trying to get into the forefront, they kind of do both, right? They want to embrace the fact that, hey, we go to space now, so like humanity goes to space now, so we probably should too. And it is in one way, I imagine, an effort for them to try and stay relevant, right? They need to embrace spaceflight and these new technologies to remain with the community. But at the same time, they've also found a way to directly connect this to the very most ancient core of their faith. They are trying to understand God. There's a whole lot of people out there, so let's ask them about that as well. And they actually make clear, like, this is not us trying to be missionaries. This is us trying to learn. And we bring a lot of people who are very highly qualified also, because I mean, very much in tradition of Catholic Church, they're very interested in pursuing science and funding science and having people on board that manage to bridge that gap. So, yeah, very much traditional in that sense. And like you say, a very loving, aspirational portrayal of religious people in science fiction, which we don't all that often get to see.
I think the portrayal of religious figures that we get here a lot in Babylon 5 is that of probably a comparison would be like in Europe monasteries, how they worked in medieval times, of these group of people preserving knowledge and preserving it for future generations, because it's something that, especially when you look at medieval times, people often forget happened, that people sat down and translated old ancient Greek knowledge into Latin so that it could be worked with. Like they didn't burn it and said it was devil's stuff. They translated it and worked. And a lot of knowledge that we had that we could work on was actually preserved by these monks translating scripture after scripture. So that religion always has this kind of knowledge preserving function in a way, although it can be very cryptic and very hard to deal with and very hard to understand at all. That is something that is very often pointed out in Babylon 5.
But I think also, I mean, all of which is to say, it's not a coincidence that we see this faith represented here by monks, as in like a monastery sort of being set up on Babylon 5 rather than a mission being set up on Babylon 5. And without spoiling much, we can say we do get to see like Christian preachers later on in the show that are much more in the tradition of people who do want to convert people and are like much more actively in there. So it's showcasing both to us.
I mean, it's definitely not only showcasing the positive thing, but it's like rare that the positive aspect is also showcased.
Yes, it's rare. And I mean, the show definitely makes a clear distinction. Okay, we have the positive portrayal, which we want to have permanently on the show, and then we have one-offs showcasing other things. But I think now that we've established, okay, this is what they're here for. They want to stay. They have like a peculiar set of skills that they bring. We can talk about how these skills are brought to fruition in this investigation specifically.
We can talk about Garibaldi's wonderful prediction ability regarding face recognition.
Well, I mean, that's just the show being a 90s show.
Yes. I just love it. I just love the irony. Because yeah, I mean it could be so reasonable and so logical to say that yes, this is such a basic human instinct, like how should a machine be able to do that? And because I think it's kind of a struggle nowadays, also in times of AI and whatever, that we think, okay, but somewhere there has to be this human core, and we find very abstract and weird abilities that we be like, oh, this is the human core, when it's something just like recognizing, okay, faces. Of course, machines can do that, but we can load it up with so much.
I mean, if we go like this far into the philosophical implications of it, I think we do have sort of the tension where, like Star Trek, for example, is very strong in suggesting there's an intangible human quality that you just can't grip. And I think Babylon 5 would be much more a universe that would readily acknowledge, like, no, there isn't. Like, I mean, we do get an entire episode where, like, Babylon 5 came with a fully, like, intelligent AGI. It was just disabled because it was malfunctioning as it was an asshole. So it's much more, like, open about, oh, yeah, like, no, you can just, replace humans like that. You probably wouldn't want to, but you can. But I think there's still, like, for the show, this is just part of the suspension of disbelief. We just know computers in Babylon 5 work differently. Like, if you have a USB crystal and you want to put, like, a bunch of data on there, you're going to have to wait 3 hours. And that doesn't make any sense, but it's how computers work in the setting. And the same as, like, facial recognition just doesn't exist. So humans have to do it. But, like, once you get past that, I think it's a really nice way of showcasing, okay, what would these monks actually be good at? Like, what do you use a bunch of dedicated people for? It's basically, they do something that all of Garibaldi's security force couldn't be bothered to do, which is just sit down and stare at a bunch of screens for a very long time because they have that patience.
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, we just have to talk about the actual resolution of the plot then.
Oh yes, that's true.
Like, the facial recognition leaves us to the apartment. We've talked about the apartment and how our bad guy is set up in there, but Sheridan needs to go in and save the day in true Sinclair fashion. Do we have any comments on that?
In true Sinclair fashion.
Well, yes, I think if it was Sinclair, we would be talking about how he still has his death wish and wants to go talk with the guy with a massive bomb strapped to his chest, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. We were talking about it while we were watching it, and I think we also agreed on that we have to talk about how Sinclair would have solved this situation if he would have solved it that much head on.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen Sinclair as this like confrontational on a personal level.
I mean, from the writing, I would agree with you, but there is this thing where like every second episode in the first season ends up with him in a shootout, like personally trying to pursue the Soul Hunter or something like that. He definitely has that streak.
He has that streak of getting himself into these dangerous situations. He has this death wish, but would he be standing there and body fighting and arguing with the terrorist, or would he be out there trying to dismantling the?
It really is a question of like which death wish would call to him more.
And I don't see him standing there telling him you're a bad person and punching him in the face. Like, that's not Sinclair for me. I don't know. I don't see him doing that. I think he would really be in another key position where he also, as a commander, is not supposed to be.
I mean, I will grant you he loves fighting his Star Fury, so he will probably be out there in his little spacesuit, flinging the fusion bomb out into space.
Because I think he has a very different style, a very different personal style of confronting evil and of confronting danger. And I think for me, the difference that I found important is it's not a head-on punching danger into the face like that.
Sure.
I think that's... I mean, there's also a later point where we can talk about it, but for me, that is actually the difference, because he's a lot more calm, a lot more organized, and then actually takes the most dangerous tasks of what he just organized on himself.
That definitely, to some degree.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, I mean, there's a lot of what ifs that we can talk about. Let's talk about how Sheridan actually handles this.
Head on.
I mean, yeah, but there is more to it, right? Like, there is actual, like, it's not just him going in there and punching the guy, it's him engaging into this kind of psychological game where he has to, like, get enough time out of this guy for Garibaldi and his team to actually resolve the entire issue, which is I think, really nice to see, because we haven't gotten that many chances to see Garibaldi and Sheridan really work closely together on an issue like this, and now they both have to fully rely on each other to know what the plan is and what it requires, and without having a chance to communicate a whole lot, because he has his communicator shoved up his ass, there is this extra level of, this mutual trust being reaffirmed, which is great.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think it is great, yeah.
I do like that pretty much the last words of our bad guy that we get is him noticing that the explosion doesn't come and saying that's not fair. I think it's just like this little cherry on top of, him really being convinced that he had this master plan in place and just didn't work because it was honestly very simple to dismantle. This is maybe the only thing that I'm almost a little bit upset about with this episode, that for the sake of TV tension, this guy comes very close to succeeding, even though at every turn of the actual investigation, is it that boring? At every turn of the investigation, it is so easy to stay on his track. So, for my personal satisfaction, it would have been great if there wouldn't even have been any issue at all. Like, by the time Sheridan goes in and confronts him, the bomb is already diffused. It's just not a concern anymore.
Yeah, but that's not TV tension, so...
No, that's not how these kinds of things work. But okay, I think this brings us more or less to the end of this episode. We talked a bit about Londo's character moments, very briefly about Linnea's character moments as well, and sort of the wacky character that is our bad guy of the week. This is one, it's not the last, but it is one of the last, like, really one-off adventures that we will have in a long while, because like you like saying, we keep accelerating slowly towards the main thrust of the story. We do have at least two very notable, like, individual stories coming up, but yeah, we're not going to see this sort of everyday Babylon 5 much longer.
And I'm waiting for it. I can't wait.
You can't wait until Sheridan punches somebody else in the face. I know
Yeah.
where we're gonna get there. But until then.
Until then, we are on Facebook where we have our own discussion group. We are on Twitter and on Mastodon and on Instagram and on YouTube. We are Third Age Podcast everywhere, and you can find us everywhere else where you can find podcasts. But of course, here on YouTube we are the cutest because here you can see us.
Nice.